Talks outside of America between China and the USA have led to a 90-day pause and a reduction in the ridiculously high tariffs that each had reciprocally put on the other. So at the moment, we have a situation where there is a 30% tariff on Chinese goods being imported into the US and a 10% tariff on American goods being imported into China. And there's been a deal between the UK and the US, and that first day when he held up that scorecard and 30% plus 40, 50% tariffs on countries, well, those have all been paused. On the day that Donald Trump made that big announcement, this is the tariff aggression that we are pursuing. I spoke to Dr. Michael Power, a consultant at Kaskazi, and I said to him, where's this going? And he said, I have no idea, honest enough to say that. And now that we're in this pause, Michael, is it possible to say, looking back, because hindsight's always so much easier, to say whether there have been winners and losers, whether the global trade situation is in a neutral position vis-a-vis where we were before that White House Rose Garden announcement? Better off, worse off? What can you say now?
Hi there. I thought you were going to ask me, so what's changed? And my answer was going to be, I still don't know where anything is really going. We seem to be on some sort of roller coaster where one day China is up, and as you may have heard today, the EU is down. In fact, Trump famously said the EU is worse than China. So as you can imagine, we really don't know where we stand. I think what's going on at the moment is that there are short-term ups and downs which the market is being held hostage to. But there's a long-term realization that the United States is becoming an unreliable trade partner because you simply can't plan what it is that you want to be doing over the long term. You probably opportunistically will try and get goods into the United States where you can, like, for instance, over the next 3 months for the Chinese. But I can't think that they are basing their 5-year plan, and the Chinese are famous for their 5-year plans, around the idea that they're always going to be able to sell to the United States. I think they are now diversifying away from the United States as fast as they can. And not only the Chinese, I think the Europeans are pretty much going down the same line of reasoning.
Because Trump and his acolytes have been claiming victory, that what the US now has is significantly better for US consumers and for US manufacturers' actual and potential than was the situation before he came into office in January. I mean, I don't know enough about the field to be, other than to say I'm instinctively suspicious of any claim Donald Trump makes about success. But
I think probably it's worse for consumers and it's worse for manufacturers. And consumers, perhaps it's not as bad as we might have thought, even this time yesterday. Before, or at least 3 days ago, before the U.S. blinked in Geneva. But the reality is that the cost of imports has gone up, even if he likes to think that it's China that's paying the tariffs, which of course it's not. And meanwhile, I'm not sure that it's done anything particularly to make U.S. manufacturers who want to invest in the United States feel that much better. So I'm not sure he's winning on either count.
And do you get a sense? I mean, trying to psychoanalyze Donald Trump is real fool's errand. But do you get a sense that even though he will never admit it in public, he has either come to the realization himself or has been persuaded by people whose opinion he values, if there is any such beast on the planet, that it was a mistake, and that to go back to those very aggressive tariffs, which he still kind of talks about as being a notional possibility, would be a mistake?
Look, I think that, and I'm probably going to be contradicted by saying this as early as tomorrow, but I think Scott Bessent has got a little bit of good sense into the discussions at the moment. And the people like Peter Navarro are being somewhat sidelined. But as I say, I'm probably going to be contradicted by something that Trump does. He seems to be, and famously this has been said, he speaks the argument of the last person he's had a conversation with. And so it really depends on who gets in to see him. But the isolationists are at the moment marginally contained, and the internationalists are marginally able to get some sense into the pronouncements that Donald Trump is saying.
In terms of South Africa, where we stand, a lot of the discussion in South Africa has, in the last 48, 72 hours, been about the contingent of persecuted Afrikaners that have made their way to the US, and I presume that's something Cyril Ramaphosa and Donald Trump will be discussing when Ramaphosa goes there sometime towards the end of May. But where does South Africa stand at the moment? Is it possible to see any clarity in this particular?
Extremely difficult to say.
Yeah.
I think South Africa is not in what one might call the most favored nation camp at the moment. The Ramaphosa might be able to salvage a little bit from his meeting with Donald Trump, and no doubt he will say some wonderfully reassuring things. But I think that pretty much we are relatively low on the list of priorities. We do export to the United States just as they export to us. I'm pretty sure that our exporters, except perhaps for the car manufacturers, are now looking for alternate markets to export to. And I think that the situation, again, will go back to what I said before. You'll do as best you can over the next few months while things are so uncertain and tariffs are flying hither and thither, up and down. But in terms of your long-term plans, even South Africa probably should not be thinking that in 5 years' time, the US is the be-all and end-all of its export markets. I mean, I always like to point out the little story of Lesotho, which will obviously get lost in the grand scheme of things, but they probably got the highest level of tariffs that's been imposed on any nation. And it's really against their textiles that 70% of their export earnings now. Included in those textiles, incidentally, are Donald Trump's golf shirts. This is the strange world that we now live in. I don't know how Lesotho is going to be able to, because Donald Trump had never even heard of the place a few months ago, is going to be able to cope. I don't think South Africa will cope that much better, to be perfectly honest. And we are going to continue to look into Africa, into Asia, into even Latin America for potential new export markets. It's a little bit more complicated for the car companies.
Thank you very much to Dr. Michael Power, currently a consultant at Kaskazi. And somebody needs to tell Donald Trump that Lesotho is quite close to Nambia.